So we're here with Miss Emily Manuel. She's one of the FFA advisors at Crowley High School, and she had the opportunity last summer to serve on the National Chapter Award National Committee in Indianapolis, right, Miss Emily?
Yes, and I also had to attend summer judging.
And correct. And because of that experience, and how many more years do you have on the committee, Miss Manuel?
As of right now, until convention of 2021.
So what we're hoping to do is use the knowledge that she's gaining from interacting with national FFA staff and with FFA teachers and state staff from other states to help further enhance our National Chapter Award program. Historically, we've been pretty good here in Louisiana. We've got national finalists almost every year. And so Ms. Manuel is going to share with you today some best practices that she's learned from serving on this committee to help other chapters in our state who want to be involved with National Chapter Award. So Ms. Manuel, go ahead and take it away. And if we have questions, we'll stop you and ask along the way.
Okay, great. So this PowerPoint just kind of goes through a little bit of where to start with your program of activities, and then more specifically about how to go about writing Form 2 of your National Chapter Award. And so to kind of introduce that with organizing your program activities and then leading into your National Chapter application, you'll need to be familiar with the divisions and quality standards. So there are 3 major divisions. Those are growing leaders, building community, and strengthening agriculture. With each division, there are 5 quality standards. And so these could be committees that your students have, or just the way that you kind of break down your plan for the year. And so it helps a lot with your planning and preparation to make sure it's really well balanced. These are the quality standards that are put out by National FFA. There's also a link. Let me see if it's going to work. This program of activities resource guide is in the box file on ffa.org, and it shows you the descriptions of each quality standard. If it will load. Okay, oh, it didn't bring it right to the one. We'll come back to that because I have it somewhere else. Let's see. Well, it's further in the PowerPoint. I'll find it later. But in those box files, it has all of these things that I'm going to be talking about. So we have leadership, healthy lifestyle, scholarship, personal growth, career success, environmental, human resources, citizenship, stakeholder engagement, and economic development. And then under agriculture, support group, chapter recruitment, safety, agricultural advocacy, and agricultural literacy. And the definitions really help you to kind of, and it gives examples of what type of activities would go in each category. So our POA, like we know, helps us to define our chapter goals and the steps that we need to meet those goals. So you might have a program of activities that you use to set up your application. For us, we just use a Google Calendar, and then we make our own Google documents with our goals for those activities. But our calendar really serves as our program of activities, and my students create that and keep that working. It helps you to address the needs of your chapter and kind of gives you direction from year to year. You can go back to it. That's what I really like about using a Google Calendar for that, is I can look at it from year to year, and the kids can kind of see what the previous team before them did and kind of work off of that. It lets you lay out your budget. And also for me, I think the biggest thing with a POA is it really lets your students see everything that has to go into running a chapter, and they tend to take a lot more ownership when you show them that they can really create this program of activities for the members and the students at your school, and they tend to take a lot of pride in that and see that as a really great thing to be a part of. It lets them plan and develop those leadership skills while getting involved in their community. So this is one activity that I do to help, and this is kind of something that we do at Officer Retreat. We brainstorm from the year before, and then we sort our activities into groups. So this is an activity that we want to keep. It ran really well. We want to keep doing it the same way, or something that we want to fix. So we like the event, but we know that it needs some more work. or events that we want to cut. It was something that someone asked us to do one time, or it just really didn't work out and we want to go a different direction, or activities that we saw throughout the year that we need to add that would meet a need that we weren't currently meeting. And so I lay all this out on Post-it notes and flip chart paper and let them kind of figure it out from there. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, so when we talk specifically about Form 2 of the National Chapter application, there are 10 things to really remember, and this was given to me from a PowerPoint that I saw at summer judging. So the first thing, you want to have a great program of activities, like I've kind of touched on already. You want to follow the rubric. National FFA gives you the rubric with really specific criteria for everything, so use it. Pick a format and stick with it throughout the application, and I'll show you examples of that. Don't force an activity to fit somewhere that it doesn't fit in the quality standards. And then make sure that you write actual SMART goals. We learn about SMART goals, and maybe our kids learn about SMART goals at camp and in their ag classes, but we really, really want to make sure that we are checking that those goals are actually SMART goals. Answer all the points in the plan of action, which I'll show you. Tell how awesome the activity is in the advancing and the impact sections. Give statistics, tell your story. Ensure the activity meets the quality standard that you chose for it. And then with the pictures, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It gets you everything that you couldn't say in other places in the application. And then make sure that you give yourself time to edit and re-edit. So looking a little deeper at those, and we can share out this PowerPoint too so that y'all have the links. But when you go on the FFA website, there are planning sheets for your POA. So there's Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, and Form 4 that give you different guides for how to set up your goals for your activities and kind of your pre-planning pieces. And then the Form 3 kind of gets into when you have your committee meeting, and then a final report of the activity when it's over. You want to make sure that it's a well-balanced POA and that there's good activities in all the divisions, so in leaders, communities, and agriculture. Not every activity, like my kids will say, like we have our big 9 activities that are going to go in our application. Not every activity is a big 9 worthy application worthy activity, and that's okay. We can't possibly do 15 activities that are just over the top and amazing. And our chapters don't really require that either. And at nationals, they're not looking for that either. So make sure that it's balanced. You've got some strong activities in each division so that it's balanced, but they don't all 15 have to be all inspiring activities. And then there's also the past resource and recognition guide. That shows you ideas from chapters that have won either a premier chapter or models of excellence in the past to kind of give you ideas of what other chapters are doing.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, yes.
Before we move on, I have a question for you on that one.
Okay.
So whenever chapter is trying to create an activity for their POA, thinking about the National Chapter Award in mind, what would you say they should be focusing on to create a good activity that's going to do well with National Chapter Judging? Are we looking for something that's really unique? Are we looking for something that can be replicable from chapter to chapter? Or are we looking for something that is very specific to the community? I mean, what do you think from your experience are we looking for? Is it a combination of all of those?
Kind of all the above. So to be that 3-star chapter at nationals, it depends on what your goal is, but like 3-star chapter at nationals is like what my kids, the first year that I came to Crowley, like that's what they wanted as their goal. They had a state goal too, but then that was their goal, was we want to be 3-star at nationals. So we really focused on activities that were well-rounded, that we knew we could come up with 3 strong goals for, and that met needs of our chapter and was going to be easy for us to write about. Whenever you get to that next level of trying to go for the premier chapters award, they're looking for unique activities that is not the same old thing that we see every time. Unique to your community would be a good thing and a good place to start. And then also they do want it to kind of be something that you can share with other chapters that they could replicate. So it's kind of all of the above. The being able to replicate the activities, I think, is more of a models of excellence thing when they are picking the top 10 overall chapters. They want those activities to be really well-rounded activities that other chapters could look at and then replicate. So it's kind of all of that. For me, when I came to a new school that hadn't done national chapter in a while, I really let the kids guide it and see, okay, what do you think, looking at these quality standards, is there anything that kind of sticks out to you that you think our community or our school really needs? And then the kids kind of came up with a rough draft of what they liked. And then my co-teacher and I kind of sat down and were like, okay, what's really realistic for us to get to do? Who in the community can we reach out to get help with this? And then we kind of went from there. So there are activities that the kids might really like that sometimes don't pan out because you can't get the support that year. Like we've had activities that maybe didn't happen until the second or even the third year because we kind of had to process them a little bit more. So it just kind of depends. But you can definitely get a 3-star at nationals without having really out of the box crazy ideas. Because I know I always say I'm not a creative thinker when it comes to coming up with new activities, but my kids are. And so I kind of had to work with them on that. But the first year that we did it here at Crowley, and we were gold at state and 3-star at nationals, majority of our activities were things that we did at school, that the kids came up with, nothing super extraordinary, but we made it meet the needs of our community and our students. And that's really what the application is judging, is meeting you where you're at in your community and in your school with your chapter. So I hope that answers that. Does that answer that?
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So moving on kind of from the POA, when you start to look at the actual application itself, you want to follow the rubric. And I'll show you on the next few slides the wording that's in the rubric. But it's given to you. It's on the National FFA website. I'm pretty sure it's on our state website as well. And the judges, when they are looking at applications, they are looking at your application and they're looking at the rubric. And they are saying, does it check this box? Does it check this box? They're looking at the high points and they're saying, does it meet this criteria? Look over and highlight specific demands of the rubric and then make sure to include them. Pretend your audience knows nothing about FFA, your chapter, your activities, and an application process. Spell it out for them and make it impossible to lose points. Have someone grade your finished application using the rubric. And so my kids always joke about this too. Like I have my mom look at my application because she was a junior high English teacher. And so she will catch things that I don't see because I just look at it so much. And so she'll catch some things that I never would think of. Have other people at your school look at it. It's a great thing to have your principal look at. Even kind of when you're in those rough draft stages, have your counselor, have your principal look at it, because then they see, wow, they really are doing all these things. And I never realized how much work they're putting into this. And so when you do get some recognition, when you get that silver or gold emblem or 2 or 3 star or whatever, your principal is like vested in it with you because they saw what your kids went through to get to the finished application. And so give people around your school the rubric and have them grade it. And it kind of gives you an idea of what someone who's not familiar with it will see whenever they just get that rubric and they get that application and they have to get through it. So that to me is the best way to make sure that your application is ready to go. Pick a format and stick with it throughout the application, especially at nationals judging. And it's going to be a little bit different this year because everything will be online. So judges won't be looking at as many applications as they had in the past. When I went to summer judging, I looked at, I can't even tell you how many applications, but we were looking at 30 applications a day. at least. And so you had to really be able to glance at it and see, yes, it meets the rubric, no, it does not. And you didn't have more than 5 minutes to look at an application. So it was kind of, that was kind of eye-opening for me. So it's important to just follow that rubric. And if your format is the same throughout all of your activities, it makes it easier to read. So like, even though each of my kids on my officer team and some of my leadership seniors get assigned an activity that they're the chair of or they're in charge of, and so they write those parts of the application. But before they ever start writing, I say, okay, this is the format that we're going to follow. I show them some examples, and then they all write in that same format. So even though it's different people's voices and wording, we're still all following the same format, and that makes it easier to read. If they have to look hard for it, you're probably not going to get the points. So, and I have formatting with each of these things. Don't force an activity to fit a quality standard. It either does or it doesn't. Understand what activities go with each POA division and quality standard. When you read those descriptions of the quality standards, it gives you specific wording that they want it to meet, but it also gives you example activities. And I know, like, for us, that usually helps us decide, is it similar to any of these things, and we can decide what quality standard it falls under. And sometimes it's not that straightforward, and there are a couple activities that can cross over. Like, we were looking at some of our activities, personal growth and career success. We're kind of like, we had 2 activities that we were like, well, these could go in either place. But when we looked at the examples, it helped us to make that decision of which one should go where. So definitely use the resources that are there. Don't combine activities to get 3 good goals. If there's a deduction for using more than one activity in one spot, so if it happens on different days and it's not related, there's a good chance that you can get a deduction for that. And it's 25 points per time that it happens, and that is a lot of points. I know, especially when it comes down to our state judge, and we get really close. And so you want to make sure that you're not combining activities just to get those 3 good goals. Make sure that the activity falls in the correct date range. Planning can occur outside the date range, but the activity cannot. That even gets a little iffy for me. Like, I make sure that all my stuff that I'm using falls in the date range, because you set your own date range. That's something that I had never really thought about before, but you go in and you set your date range for what it is going to be. So there's really no reason that you should have an activity out of date range. Because like I said, it's, you set it for yourself. And I know I saw, like, at summer judging a couple of times, people made like a typo on the year because maybe it happened in the fall semester. And so they put 2018 or they put 2019, but it happened in the fall semester. If you do it one time at nationals, they weren't taking off points. But if it consistently looked like you had copied and pasted or something, then they took off the points. Or you just mixed up and they took off the points. So make sure it's in the date range. Activity descriptions. So this is kind of the first part of when you go in to start writing your Form 2 for each activity. The first thing you're going to have to write is your activity description. Descriptions clearly explain the purpose and reason the chapter is implementing the activity. It clearly answers the following questions. What is the purpose of the activity? Why is the activity taking place? Okay. And again, this wording comes directly from the rubric. I just have it in a PowerPoint. So descriptions need to address what's the purpose and why is it taking place. So an example of this would be like this high points example. FFA members notice students discouraging their peers and others struggling with self-esteem. So this is why it's happening in our purpose. And then it goes on to describe what exactly happened with the activities and a little bit of what the result was. Something to note in here, just from looking at this activity description, I can tell which quality standard this is because I know the quality standard definitions. The part where they say it is designed to promote and improve mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits of members, that wording comes directly from the quality standard description. And so if you're doing that in your description, it already tells them that you know why this fits where it fits. And so I always tell my kids to not try to recreate the wheel and get too fancy with their wording. They're giving you those words. They want you to use them, and it makes it easier for the judge to grade. So again, if you're only writing one sentence and it's not really addressing those questions, you're probably not going to get points. If you're somewhere in between the paragraph and the sentence, you'll get some points. And then moving on with the SMART goals. You want to make sure that you're double checking that it is a SMART goal. It's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Check your written goals to make sure it hits the mark. Again, I don't sit there coming up with SMART goals for these activities. My kids write them. So I make sure that I leave myself enough time to check them and then kind of step away from them and then check them again to make sure, and have them trade and check each other's SMART goals to make sure that they are really SMART goals. They are very specific. If someone who knew nothing about your activity looked at these goals, would they know that they were a SMART goal? And this, again, this bit at the top is from the rubric. Goals are well written and utilize all 5 components of a SMART goal. So this high points one is an example. FFA members will post 600 positive messages around the ag building to help promote positive self-esteem by January 31st, 2019. So it gives us some numbers in there that we can measure. It's specific about who's doing what, where. It gives us a time, and so we know that that's a SMART goal. When I was judging too, that's something, like I was always looking for a date. I was always looking for some kind of number or something that they could measure, who was doing it, where it was happening, then that meets a SMART goal. Again, like with the second one, they don't, just from glancing at it, you can tell that they didn't say when it was going to happen. They didn't tell me how many messages, so that's not a SMART goal. So you just want to kind of keep that in mind, and those are some good examples of the different point ranges. The plan of action. This is probably the most difficult part, and where you kind of have to pick your formatting is with your plan of action. So you want to make sure that you're answering all points. Start out by answering the questions: who, what, when, where, and how, and then write it in the format that you've chosen. Some different examples of formatting are on the next slide. So this is from the rubric also. Plans of action clearly identify what needs to be accomplished to meet the goal, where will the activity take place, how will the chapter implement the goal to accomplish the activity, and how will the goal be accomplished. This should include necessary steps for completion and who's going to perform the duties to meet the goal. And there's a variety of styles for this. So here's some examples, and the style that I'm using this year actually is a combination of a few of these. So the first one is just writing it in paragraph form. It's telling us when they're going to have their committee meeting, what they're going to do there, and then they're going to place the notes around the school by the week of the 21st to the 25th. So it's very specific about what they're doing. Again, it's kind of doing the same thing as you do with your SMART goals, making sure that it answers all of those questions. The style number 2 is the same thing. Just inside there, you're putting the who, how, what, where, and when in parentheses. And so a lot of judges at the national level like this style because it's pointed out for you. But I think that this one can kind of give you some trouble if you're not as experienced with the application. And I personally, as a judge, didn't like it because I found that people were just throwing in the parentheses in places that it really didn't match. And so I took off points because not only was I having to try to find where their stuff was, but the parentheses was distracting me. And so some people felt that way too. But a lot of people like having the who, what, where, when pointed out. That last style is the way that I have always done my plan of action in the past. And that's the way that I learned to do it. It's kind of like the old style now. You put the month in parentheses and then what your first step is, and then step 2 and the month that you're going to do it in, and then what your step was to meet your SMART goal. And I always really, really like this format, and there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to be very specific with it so that the judges know that you're answering the who, what, when, where, how questions. I am kind of switching to doing a combination of that and the style 2. So I'm putting who, what, when, where, how, kind of in a bulleted format and just answering it in a bullet point. And then when I get to the how, I'm writing complete sentences about how we're going to do whatever the goal was, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the main point you're trying to point out is that you have to be really specific with the narrative of what you're trying to say. Kind of like you said earlier, don't make the judge go search for anything.
Right. Don't make them search for it. And I don't have really polished examples of the way that I'm doing it this year yet. So my kids are still in their rough draft, so I haven't gotten there yet. So I didn't have an example to stick in here, but I'm doing it more of a bullet point type thing. And if anybody wants to see that when we get to maybe like a week or 2 from now, I can definitely share that example with you too, if anybody wants to see that after the fact. But I would say if you pick one of these formats, you'll do fine. You can definitely get full points with any of these as long as you're being specific. The outcome evaluated and reported, this goes along with the plan of action point. So in your application, you're going to have goal 1, plan of action, outcome. Goal 2, plan of action, outcome. Goal 3, plan of action, outcome. And so your outcome evaluated and reported is where you just kind of sum up everything that happened. So you're reporting on it after the fact. So what it says in the rubric, response states whether the goal was unmet, met, or exceeded. If all aspects of the SMART goal were met, it states by how much if exceeded. If the goal was unmet, circumstances or reasoning why is explained and what would be done differently next time to meet the goal. So there are no points given for saying that you exceeded it or that you met it versus it was not met. It does not matter which one you pick as long as you explain it. So sometimes, like when you're judging, you'll see that they put exceeded on every single goal. Well, did you really make these goals ahead of time if you exceeded every single one in every single activity? Probably not. It doesn't make it very realistic. And so it's okay to say that it's unmet. Like we tend to have a lot of weather incidents here in Louisiana. And so if you say, this goal was unmet because we were unable to have it on our original scheduled date because of a flood, and you explain that we weren't at school that day because there was a flood, that's fine, that your goal was unmet. And it kind of gave you a little more to your story to explain. And so that's completely fine, and you would get all your points. So you just want to make sure that you're choosing what's appropriate for the activity and then explaining whether it was exceeded, met, or unmet. And these examples show you kind of what would give you points. That's why I like to make sure that my kids really put something measurable, preferably some kind of number in their SMART goal, because then they can come back to that number like they did with the how many notes. So their goal was to have 650, and they said there were over 650 notes written and shared. To me, even too, I would make my kids say it was exceeded by how much, like give a percentage or a number value of how much more you did than what your goal said, just to make sure that your bases are covered. That's what I do. And so the midpoints one, the difference is they don't say it was over 650 notes. And so that's not going to get your full point. So just make sure that you're giving yourself something measurable that you can come back to in that outcome section. And then this is probably like two of my favorite parts of the application is the advancing and impact sections. This is your chance to tell how awesome the activity is, give statistics, and really tell your story about what happened with that activity. Don't be afraid to brag on what your chapter accomplished and who it helped, because I know for a lot of us as ag teachers, we don't think of the things that we do every day being that extraordinary, but to some people in our community or some students in your chapter, it is really, really impactful. And so you want to make sure that you brag on that, and letting your kids write that is probably the best way to do that, because they'll see, they see the impact in their peers sometimes more than we do. If it's something that's in the leadership activity, or just different things that you hear from people in the community after the activity, you could put that there. Just really take the time to brag on your activity. And then make sure that you're meeting the rubric criteria. Address each POA division. If it's in the leaders section, address advancing leaders. And I'll show y'all this example next. But when I was judging, a lot of times I would see people, they had it in the growing leaders division, but they were talking about how to advance agriculture. Well, that's not going to get you your points because you're not addressing that division that you put the activity in. So you want to make sure that you're meeting that. So some examples here. The response for advancing. Response clearly states the purpose of the activity and the benefit the activity had on the leaders, community, or agriculture. When you're, and to these little bits from the rubric, when you're in AET or you're in the application manager on FFA.org, if you roll over those little blue ribbons next to each text box, it shows you these little blurbs to know what goes in there. So for our high points, the really important sentence is the one that says, this activity advanced leaders by encouraging improvement in the mental well-being and self-esteem of our members. However, our chapter and community were also affected due to the positive pay-it-forward activities members conducted. So, number one, they're saying it advanced leaders by, but they're also tying back into that quality standard that they chose at the beginning with saying the mental well-being and self-esteem of our members. So those are just kind of some little tricks to keep in mind when you're writing this part. And then the impact is going to be your next box that kind of goes along with it. Your response clearly identifies and describes how the impact of the activity affected the intended audience. So again, in the impact, if you can give some kind of, like this one is in the healthy lifestyles and some of those leadership ones, it's harder to quantify what the impact was. But if you can give some kind of statistic, like percentage or number of how many people were impacted or something like that, it's going to be easier for you to get those high points with every judge. Because their eye naturally goes to that and they're like, oh yeah, they showed me impact because they told me a statistic. So just keep that in mind. If it's possible, it's not always possible. Mine definitely don't all do that. But that's just kind of another little trick to it too. If you can do that, it's gonna help you. And then ensure that the activity meets the quality standard. This is so important because you can lose points on pretty much every section in that rubric if the judge really wants to, if you don't meet the quality standard. So use the words provided to prove the activity meets the quality standard. Those quality standard descriptions are given to you for a reason. They want you to use them. Like when we were doing national judging, if you didn't use the words for the quality standard, you were not getting the high points, which is kind of redundant, but at the same time, it's less work for you because you're using the wording that they already gave you. So the activity and benefits relate directly to the selected quality standard. Again, you're picking where these activities go. So just make sure that it fits. Like for this one, healthy lifestyles were encouraged through Operation Beautiful as students intentionally promoted confident mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits. All of that wording, mental well-being, self-esteem, and positive character traits, that all comes from that quality standard description. And so the midpoints one, the way that that's different is they didn't use the words and expand on the words from the quality standard. So, and then the pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words, or the number that's allowed in the application. There's a lot of characters for that photo caption, and you want to use it. That is your chance to tell anything else that you were not able to fit somewhere else on the application. Pick a really good action shot photo that tells the story, or at least a specific part of the story of what happened at that event. Provide additional information in the caption that you don't provide in the written section. So our captions shouldn't be, in this picture, member whoever is seen doing this. It's kind of like the same thing with the proficiency application. Like, you don't want to just be describing what's happening in the picture. You want to be describing how the picture illustrates the total picture of what happened at that activity. So I always try to get as many people as possible in the picture without it being a post picture. You want a big snapshot of your whole activity and something that gives you some kind of story to write about. So like, I know for one that my kids are working on right now, we have a really big shot of the activity room at the nursing home that we visited for Christmas, and it shows a lot of different groups of kids talking with different residents. And so the caption on that will talk about how the students formed connections with specific people and really go into detail about what members said about their resident that they adopted, and different connections that they had. Like, we had students that went back on their own time during Christmas break to visit with those same residents that they had adopted again. So we would say things like that in the photo caption because there's nowhere else in the application to address that. And so that's really nice. You want to pick a clear, high quality photo illustrating the chapter's activity in action being displayed. That's something that's nice about going online this year is you won't have to worry about printer issues messing up your photo quality. We have used phone pictures in the past. Now our iPhones, are so high tech that we can get good quality pictures from a phone. But we also invested in a chapter camera that we take to everything with us so that we can make sure we have good pictures. Also, when you take the pictures, you want to take them landscape so that it's longer horizontally. And so it really fits the whole box. It formats kind of weird. And they don't really want you cropping pictures or, like it says at the bottom, doing any kind of photo collage. Like, you won't get points for that. Be interesting and informative, really tell a story. Did you say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. And don't repeat photos within the application. This also, and don't repeat photos from year to year. We actually, I saw some of this get taken care of at summer judging. We were looking at printed applications at summer judging this year. And so if you got caught with something like that, it was because the same person was reading your application and someone else's, and they really couldn't check from year to year. But now that it's online, it's going to be able to be run through a plagiarism site like they do with a lot of other applications already, like with your American degrees or proficiencies and things like that. And so you really want to make sure that you're not repeating photos, and also that you're not just copying and pasting an activity either, because they will be checking for that. And they're going to be able to catch it. Yeah, and they're going to be able to catch it.
Manuel, and for everyone listening, please make sure that you understand this across all award applications, that National FFA does run a plagiarism check. And if you pull a photo off of Google, that's plagiarism. It's not an original photo. It'll be disqualified. You won't even get scored. It's harder for us to catch that on the state level because we're grading physical copies. But if you qualify to move on to nationals from here and it gets caught, you're going to get disqualified and you're preventing someone else from our state from moving on. So please be really careful not to plagiarize anything.
Yeah. And even with like your activity descriptions, like a lot of times, and you're limited on characters for that too. A lot of times your activity descriptions are really close from year to year. Well, they keep old files of your chapters. They keep all of that at National FFA, your old award applications. And so they can go back and look, did they change this enough or is it just copied and pasted? And so, yes, some of your wording is going to be the same. Some of it's going to be that way, but your goals for your activity should not be the same from year to year. So if you're changing it a little bit, they're going to, if it was flagged for some reason when they run it through the plagiarism thing, they should be able to look at that and tell if you really were copy and pasting or if you just had a few of the same things. Does that make sense? They kind of touched on that at summer judging, but we didn't talk about it in depth. But like I know when I was judging, I read 2 applications that were from the same state, and I was reading it and I was like, I feel like I read this already. And so I flipped back through my pile that I had right there at my table, and it was the same exact thing. It had different pictures, but it was the same exact activity written the same exact way with the same exact goals for 2 chapters, and they both got disqualified because you can't tell who, in that moment, they couldn't tell who had copied who, and so they just both got disqualified. So just be really careful with that kind of stuff. And again, I know I said this, but photo collages, if you try to put more than one picture together in that box, you'll get a 0 for your photo, and you don't want that to happen. With your caption, I don't have an example of a picture, but this is an example of a caption for a picture. They're using all the characters. They're telling us things that didn't get told anywhere else. And so, like, they handed out flowers also with the notes and things like that. So we didn't see that other places in the application. Really tell a story. And just put anything else that wasn't in your application in that photo caption. And then, like I said before, cannot stress this enough, the editing process is where you win an application. I know that going into national convention last year, I got together with some other chapters at the Region 2 conference, and we traded and we checked and we found tons and tons of stuff that we had each done wrong that got submitted to state that way. Because we weren't looking at it with fresh eyes. And then once we had stepped back for a month and then came back to it, we caught all kinds of things that could have been fixed before we sent them to state judging that we were able to fix for national judging. So find your team of people that are going to be able to help you edit and get that out to them. Have different types of people, have other people at school, have people that in industry or community members look at it. Have your kids trade and check each other. I make my kids, unless they have a question about something, but for the most part, before I sit down and do my edits, I make my kids trade with each other and grade with the rubric, and then go back and make edits before I sit down to do my edits. That way I'm not wasting or spending a lot of time editing things that the kids could have caught themselves. And so that's my biggest thing with this application. Don't think of it as something else that you have to do. Let it be something that helps keep your chapter organized and keeps your kids motivated to really take ownership in the things that your chapter are doing. Because even if you've never filled out an application before, I know that we have great things going on in our state and really great activities that chapters are doing that they're not getting recognition for because they see this application as something that's just so big to take on. And so please don't let that stop you from sharing the great things that your chapter is doing, because I feel like we all and our kids should be getting that recognition for those things that they're doing. And so if you ever have any questions, make sure that you use the rubric. And please reach out to me, because I'm always loving to help with this stuff. And my kids think I'm crazy because they're like, you just get so like wrapped up in this. I have posters all over my classroom of all the different things we have going on and what quality standard. And we talk about it when my officers or my leadership kids come to class, because I'm just so wrapped up in it right now. So I would love to help anybody, anytime. My email's there, and yeah, just let me know if you need help.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Manuel.
if it's something something that I can't answer, I can reach out to the committee in National FFA too.
Sure. I definitely think that we have a lot of schools that probably don't think that their activities that they do are good enough. I remember the first year that when I was teaching that our chapter filled out National Chapter Award, I didn't think we would do really well either, and we ended up doing pretty well. So I think that a lot of schools probably have a good program of activities. I think the application itself is just what's pretty intimidating when you see it for the first time. So would you agree that once you do it once, it gets a lot easier after that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so for me, and that's kind of for me with my move from coming from a chapter that had been doing national chapter for a long time, they kind of had their process down already. And the kids were really teaching me how to do it. And I was kind of getting drug along that first year of figuring out how this works, because I had never seen it done before I taught at Sandoval. And so when I came to Crowley and my kids were like, hey, we know you were at Sandoval and y'all won last year, and we think it'd be something cool for us to do. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot for us to take on. Even then, after I had done it before, but I was with other co-teachers that had done it before, the students had done it before, and that school had already that reputation of winning. And so when I came to Crowley, I was like, this might be too much for me to take on my first year at a new program. And all of the teachers at Crowley, we were all new to this school that year. And so I was like, this might be too much to take on. And I really let the kids work through the process, and they really were awesome about it. But we had so much success that first year, and I did not think, coming from somewhere where, again, the activities were really established, to somewhere where they hadn't really done it in a while, I was like, there's no way we can compete with those activities. Like, we just don't have anything that established. I don't know the community that well, and I just don't even know where to start. And it all just kind of came together throughout the year, and I had co-teachers who had never done an application before, and we all just kind of really learned a lot that year, and we're really surprised that we really did have a lot of success with it. And I think having success with it is not about how big and grand and over the top your activities are. It's about how you're meeting the needs of your specific situation, and how much your kids are willing to really work at making a good application and paying attention to the rubric. So
I think that's a perfect summary of it right there. Make it meet the need of what your school and your community and your kids need. That's what a POA should be doing. I'm going to share my screen, Ms. Manuel, and show the teachers where they can find some of those resources you were referencing.
Yeah, it might have loaded, but I'm on a Chromebook because it was going to let me get into the box, and now it's not wanting to load.
The document you were referencing, I'll show you. There's two ways you can get to it. If you go to our state website, and if you click on association, and if you click on awards and degrees, and then click on National Chapter Award, right there on the right where it says information, that's going to take you to the national website. Mm-hmm. And it will take you directly to the National Chapter Award page. On the National Chapter Award page, when you scroll all the way down, it gives you the description of all the awards, and you scroll all the way to the bottom to resources. this is what you're going to need. This is the rules handbook, the resources that Ms. Manuel was referring to. If you click on rubrics and scorecards, you'll see how to score it. The resources regarding the descriptions of the quality standards are here. The resources, and there you go. That's the document. This one will help you tremendously as you plan your activities. Oh, not that one. Clicked on the wrong button. There you go. So it gives you the description of the quality standards and example activities that would qualify under each one. If you go directly to the National FFA website, you can also access this information. Let me show you quickly what that would be. So up top, when you go to Explore FFA, you'll come down the national chapter, and it will bring you back to the same page again.
Yeah, my school, when I go from the FFA website to the resources folder, it blocks it.
And if anyone is having issues with resources being blocked, just email me and we can download them and send them to you. I actually may be able to just put these on our website. I may go through, download all of it, and just put it on our own page. FFA's been using the box for a couple of years, and I know there's some districts that can't access anything on it. So that's a good point. We'll probably just put them on our website so everyone has access to it.
Yeah, and I have them, like, for me personally and for my kids, what I do is I save them all to a Google Drive folder. And then my kids go in and they can access that whenever they need to without having to go searching for it. They just go to their school Google and they have their folder with all their national chapter resources in it too. So that's just something that I personally do.
The final reminder that I would give everyone, if you're going to be doing national chapter this year, they're going to be due on March 25th. So that gives you about another month and a half to get your applications done. We'll be giving out some more information as it gets closer on the exact way that they're going to be scored this year. We're trying to put together a really fair, equitable way for applications to be judged. We're planning to have them all be judged completely digitally this year, so you won't have to print anything out. But we'll be sending you some more info as it gets closer. Ms. Manuel, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that's it. Just please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. I would be so happy to help people get involved in national chapter because I think it's a great program.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ms. Manuel. And if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to her or to me, and we'll be happy to help you out.